Well, hello, all you mixed up mystics out there. We're so thrilled you're here on a brand new episode. We have something that I think you're really going to like. We wanted to do a series on the state of the church in America. What does that look like? And to accomplish that, we thought who better to interview than Jason Elmore, who's been a pastor for the last 50 years, and to get his take on what the church used to look like in America, how it was culturally relevant then, and how it's culturally relevant now, what's different, and what has stayed the same. And so this is a really interesting two-part conversation, and I think you're really going to like it. So the first part, we're going to talk a little bit about Jason's own personal story and coming to faith and what that looked like, and how that became something relevant for him. And then on part two, we'll take a wider lens view of what the church looks like in America back then and now. So sit back and join the conversation. We're so thrilled you're here, and thanks for being a part of Mixed Up Mystics.
This podcast is a presentation of Pioneer Dream, celebrating 30 years of moving stories for our corporate, nonprofit, and entertainment partners. We invite you, fellow misfits, to join the conversation with text, emails, or just messages in the comment section below. As always, you can share this podcast with anyone you think would get it by sending the link now. Thanks for listening.
Well, hello, all you daring souls, and welcome back to the Mystics Podcast. We're so grateful you're here. We are coming to you, as always, from the center of the known universe, the bedazzled belt buckle of the Bible Belt of America. And I am with, as always, my co-conspirator, Anjanette.
Hello, everyone, and good day to you. Is it bedazzled or bejeweled? Did we talk about this?
They're kind of one and the same. It's over festive is what it is.
Over festive, yeah. But there was actually this thing called a bedazzler.
Right.
That you could take different clothing items and it would put jewels on them. I really wanted one.
You may remember from our last episode that we had an interview in that episode with our 13-year-old daughter. It's the first interview we've ever done on this show.
Yeah.
And
it's a new show.
Yeah, but it's still the first one. And we enjoyed that so much. We've actually been planning this interview for a while, but we decided to follow up that interview with a second interview. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my father-in-law and my pastor, Jason Elmore.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome.
Thank you.
Dad.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. And so anyway, we've talked about you a lot on the podcast, and I know you've listened to some of the episodes, so you know that. And we've been on a lot of this journey together. What I have termed kind of the fall or post-fundamentalism era. I don't know that everybody else would agree with that term.
But it's nice that you coined it.
It's kind of
post-fundamentalism.
What it really is wishful thinking.
That's what I'm thinking. Post-fundamentalism.
I'm hoping it's gone.
I'll join you.
I know, because I feel like it might be back and better than ever.
Well, sometimes those things rise up just before they're killed. But so this is a really unique opportunity because you have been in quote ministry for at least a minute.
Yes.
And I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about the changes you've seen from the moment, you grew up in Tulsa, which is kind of a mecca for all things Christian. Mm-hmm. So you had that experience of growing up in the American church at that time.
This is the Jerusalem of America.
There you go. Yeah. And then you decided at a level to go into ministry. So I want to talk about what that looked like and then changes you've seen. So first of all, try and give us a picture when you were growing up in middle America. What was the presence of the church like in culture? What was the presence of the church like in your home? What was your overall view of that growing up?
The presence of the church when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, the church was pretty corporatized. It was standard. You could plug in and expect the same quality control.
Meaning if you were to move from a town to town or change a church across town, it would be pretty much similar
like
experience.
the Baptist church was a Baptist church.
Yes, the Southern Baptist Church, any Southern Baptist church in Tulsa would have the same protocol, procedures, liturgy that they would in Paris, Texas, or Louisiana. So, people could expect the same vibe, the same thing, the same choirs, the same sermons, the same type pastor, same type buildings, the same type coloration, of the sanctuary, the same programs, etc.
Yeah. So, flashing forward a little bit, you grow up, and we've had this conversation a lot, and I know you've talked about it, but people on the podcast land may not know this. Tell us a little bit about, you are closing out high school, trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life, and then you do what?
Okay. First off, just to add a little bit to what I said earlier, as far as the church, the way it looked when I was growing up, and in our household, I was made to go to church, so to speak, every time the doors were open.
Yeah.
My parents were active in all of the programs, particularly the music programs, which were much bigger then than they are now. And so I remember being in the nursery, church nursery, and my parents coming back, and the nursery workers bad talking my parents because they're always so late to come in.
Oh my gosh, that's funny because I remember nursery workers when I was growing up in the Baptist church bad talking you guys.
Oh yeah,
interesting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so I remember not being a believer, but being in church, and even as a wee lad, I would look around and see all of the people, and somehow know all of the resources and the money and the effort and the programs and the meetings. And I just think, I would think as a young kid, as best I could understand, this is a whole lot. And these people don't believe it.
Oh. Yeah.
So you, even as a kid, you felt
I
like...
just it was kind of an existential thing. I said,
Yeah.
man, all of this going on, and I don't think anybody really believes this.
Yeah. And
So-
I know your parents were believers, but, had tough times like anybody
Yeah,
did.
like
so
anybody. My parents were believers, but it wasn't like really taught that the life-giving Spirit of God could
wasn't
be
like your-
in you.
Yeah.
It was like, go to Sunday school, go to Bible school, do all that sort of stuff.
But in your home, it wasn't like
No,
you
it
really
wasn't.
felt
No.
God's love. Although they were doing their best. They were often
Yeah, they
young.
did their best. They had tough backgrounds.
Did you
and all
have any personal awareness of or thoughts about God at that time?
Only one time, and that was when I was in Fort Smith, Arkansas, so I'd have to have been 4 or younger. And my mother and father were in a big fight. And when they would fight, it would hurt my stomach, literally. And so there'd be some yelling and, personal stuff. And so I remember getting into a closet one time when my parents were arguing. And, I was in there, and then all of a sudden it would just get quiet. Then I'd hear footsteps. And then my father, in his tan leather jacket that had a very familiar smell, put it on, picked me up, and then my other 2 brothers, who were just a little bit older, Jim and Steve, followed him, and we 3, and I assume that we were the only kids at the time, had 2 sisters later, were put in a car without safety seats and all of that. Just put in there.
Easier to drive places.
Yeah, so we are in the car with Dad, and Dad is just driving, not saying a thing. I had a sense that we needed to not say anything, and we needed to kind of hold still.
Yeah.
So I knew he was thinking about things. Drove around what seemed to me for like hours. It got dark, and then pulled into a parking lot. And in this parking lot, there were some cars, and went into a big building, and it seemed like we were going in the back door of something. Then we saw that these doors had some glass on them, and inside there were like a couple of hundred people or so sitting there, and there was a guy up front standing behind a wooden thing talking. And so then my dad took us upstairs to a balcony. There was no one else there. It was a horseshoe balcony. And I couldn't tell what the guy was talking about on the microphone down there, but all the people were holding very still. And I sat to the right of my father and my brothers to his left, and he had his head in his hands. And it was then, as a 4-year-old or so, I realized he was there because he thought he could be helped with his thoughts. So that was my first God consciousness.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. You knew he was being comforted.
Yeah, he was
seeking,
seeking for the thoughts to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So beyond that, as a kid, was was God a part of your daily awareness at all? Did it matter? I mean, you did the church stuff every Sunday.
Yeah, it wasn't part of my awareness. I mean, I was somewhat active in youth group stuff and some youth activities.
Right.
And a couple of youth trips. But no, I mean, I had some teachers there in church that had an impact on me.
Yeah.
There's one which I find interesting. One Sunday morning, I came in to the Sunday school, and they would have what they would call General Assembly before you broke off into Sunday school classes. So you had a group of people your own age. My age then was like 11 or 12, 13. And so we had this big assembly. And then the guy, I think his name was Mr. Howard, had kind of reddish hair. He stepped up to a little lectern and he said, yesterday, the world proclaimed most beautiful woman and successful woman and possibly richest woman in the world killed herself. It was Marilyn Monroe. I wonder why she did that. Now that got into my mind.
That's interesting.
So I had a connection there, and I thought maybe that comfort that my dad was looking for, maybe he was suggesting she needed or could use, and that we should think about that. It was very powerful because he didn't open it up for questions or anything, and we just went to our groups.
Wow.
Yeah. Gosh.
Poor Sunday school teachers. There you go. Have fun with
that's
it.
right.
Hey,
Have
deal with
fun.
this when you get in the room. Okay.
Because the quarterly message says that you're teaching from Ezekiel 4:12 through 65.
So feel free to weave in my comments earlier.
Yeah, but that moment had impact. I considered the presence of God to be there.
Yeah.
That there was something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Wow. So when did that change for you, Dad? What happened in your life where God became real?
I went on, say I'm in junior and senior in high school, and I liked sports, and I was playing on the church fast pitch softball team, which
Fast pitch softball.
used to be a thing.
Wow.
And it's not a thing now. It's all
Right.
slow pitch. But so I was playing on the team. My dad was also playing on that team. And he was a pitcher and a good athlete. Yeah. But one time I heard another outfielder, because I played left field, center fielder says, we got a new shortstop. And said he used to play for TU. And so I looked, and there was this little dark-headed guy in his mid-30s or so, shagging balls and fielding it and throwing it and moving around and turning to and all that. And it was impressive.
Yeah.
And then he had a good bat, too. And then his name is Bill. Then I later heard he was our new pastor.
Oh,
Oh,
funny.
wow.
And I had a conflict, a dissonance there with how can you be a pastor and do that and like have fun and your first name is not pastor or doctor.
And he was actually good.
Yeah,
at ball.
and he was good. He did not suck. His name was Bill Sanders.
Yeah.
So that had an impact on me, even though I still didn't believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I went into the Army. I went through boot camp and then was at the Naval School of Music, Norfolk, Virginia.
And you were only 17 when you
Yeah,
were
that's
in
right.
the Army.
Yeah, I was always a year young in school, so I had to have a note from my mother in the end.
Let my son fight for our country.
Yes. So I found out that I was trying to avoid fighting in Vietnam because I was and still am a coward. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And like Muhammad Ali says, I ain't got nothing against them Viet Cong. So it was a war that couldn't be explained or justified.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
I
historically,
knew
that's
that.
true now, and 58,000 of my contemporaries died.
Amazing.
During that so-called war or conflict. But I was trying to avoid Vietnam. So if you enlisted for 3 years, you had some choices, some potential opportunities. If you were drafted, it would be for 2 years, but they would choose where you were going to go and what your job was going to be. And that was always rifles and always Vietnam.
Wow.
So they had a 16-week program, 8 weeks boot camp, 8 weeks AIT, called Tigerland at Fort Polk, Louisiana, where I did boot camp, and then off to Vietnam. So, I was trying to avoid that, and I had a music background, and people said I was pretty good. I didn't think I was, but they said you can audition for the Army Band without any kind of commitment, and then if you're accepted, then you can enlist, then you can join. And it's for 3 years.
Wow.
So that's what I did, and drove down to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is the closest base, and auditioned for them. And then they sent the paperwork to a recruiter in Tulsa, hooked up with the recruiter. And the recruiter says, well, you've passed, congratulations, and you're going to go this route. So then I went to boot camp. Then I went to Norfolk, Virginia. And then I had a choice of going to any Army band.
Oh, wow.
In the United States or where we had an Army band. Could have been Hawaii, could have been Panama, could have been New Jersey, just outside New York City, Fort Dix. Wow. Could have been Florida, could have been California. And I was such an idiot, I chose Fort Sill, Oklahoma, because it was somewhat close to home.
Aww.
So they guaranteed that you would do a year at that band of your choice, and you could decline any orders that came up during that year. But once that year was up, then those orders, they would send you to any band where they had an opening, and you did not want to be in the band in Vietnam. Because they went ahead of the gun carriers and filled sandbags and made stuff like that. So anyway, when at the 10-month mark, I had orders come up for Korea. And I thought, well, I could waive this thing that would keep me there in place for a year and agree to go to Korea, because it was like anywhere but Vietnam. So I went to Korea. I got to Korea. They had three bands there. They had the United Nations Command Band in Seoul. They had another band out in the field somewhere, then another band out in the field somewhere. So you get there, and then you audition. And for whatever reason, they kept me in Seoul. So I was with the United Nations Command Band there.
And tuba was your weapon.
Tuba was my weapon. And sometimes I frightened people with the trombone or with trumpet.
You played all the brass instruments,
well,
right?
You know.
So, Dad, you were there in Seoul, Korea. And I know you had some good experiences there. You got to play in a rock and roll band that was in one of the hotels, right? And you were a bass player for that. So, but the way I understand, although there were some good memories, your life really started to take a turn for the worse, right?
Yes, I got into drugs because I could not find that comfort that my dad was looking for, or that Marilyn Monroe could have found. And so, I was kind of the invisible person, and I would get the underachieving speeches from all my teachers, and they would say, "Oh, Elmore, you could just do so much more."
So much potential.
And I said, "No, I'm just stupid." And so I said that and believed that. And so it was never with the cool kids or any of that sort of thing. But I got into the Army and around other people, and they just didn't know I was defective. And so anyway, when I first got there, I was at Kempo Airport in Seoul, and I was driven to the base. It's called Yongsan. It's a big military base. And driven in this Jeep by this guy who had picked me up to take me to where the Army band was housed, and it was a Quonset hut at the time. Later, they built a big building. But we pull up to this Quonset hut. We go inside. It's kind of the middle of the day. Nobody is there. They're out on drills or doing, performance jobs or something. And I come into this Quonset hut, nobody's there, but I see these bunk beds and stuff. And then walk through the back of the Quonset hut. And the driver and I walked out there, and then there was a guy named Groot who all of a sudden palmed his cigarette and hid it behind his back. And then the driver said, "That's okay, he's cool," talking about me. And then Groot held what I now realized was not a cigarette. I did smoke at the time. And he says, "Hey, man, you smoke?" And I went, "Yeah." And then I realized I was talking about Marlboros and he was talking about weed. So I took it in order to be accepted and took a hit. And then we just kind of passed it back and forth. And I liked the way it made me feel. Mm-hmm. So from there, it went into this and that and that and this. And then got into heavier drugs and hallucinogens and stuff. And I just didn't know it was damaging me. Mm-hmm. But one of my favorite remembrances of that is I found out I really liked meth. I really liked speed.
Oh, wow.
Because one of the guys rented a place that was off base, and you just pay a pittance for rent there. Mm-hmm. And it became kind of a party house. Mm. So we'd go there at night, and we'd stay up all night. And we were just the smartest people on the planet. We discussed history, art, literature,
and it was just
sports.
Fuel that.
And, the speed, you stay awake, you stay alert, your heart rate, everything is up. And then, like that. Wow. Then one day, it was a hot day during monsoon season. Monsoon season happens like in July or August, as I remember. But it rains in the morning, like inches of rain. Wow. Then the clouds clear and the sun comes and bakes it into mud. So the humidity is like worse than here.
Even worse than Oklahoma in August.
It's hard to imagine.
The humidity's there.
Yeah.
So we were getting ready to go out to do a job on the parade field. Somebody was coming in, some general was coming in, and he was headed over to Vietnam, which was like next door. And so, the president, the vice president, many people came through there and we played for them. Wow. So on the parade field, so this is an outdoor gig, and they have a shaded stand and all the dignitaries and then some award ceremonies, that sort of thing. So we march. Now we've moved from that Quonset hut to this new constructed huge dorm thing. So I am on charge of quarters, meaning I'm in charge of the office for a 24-hour period. I'm supposed to answer the phone. I'm supposed to take notes. I'm supposed to get people, give messages to officers and generals and that sort of thing. And so we're leaving. And so I check out of being CQ, and there's some kind of backup. We go down, and it's like a 2 or 3 block or so march down to the parade field. We get to the parade field, but just before we left on the job, this guy says, "Dude, you like chocolate?" And I said, "Yeah." And he
Still
says, "You got to taste these brownies."
Oh, no.
And so being an overeater and having issues with food, I ate 2 big ones, about 3-inch square, 2 big ones. And then we headed down the hill to go to the parade field. We get to the parade field, and it's hot, and I am sweating, and I can't get my thoughts together. And then the other guys know this. They kind of cover for me, which is, kind of keep me upright. I get back after the ceremony, and I'm supposed to be in the office there, charge of quarters, and I'm throwing up into a waste can. And it's all because of the drugs and the heat together. And then the guy said, "Oh, man, we can't let them know. We can't. You're going to get busted, man. You're going to get arrested and all this and that." And so they covered for me, and they said, "Just tell them you're just real sick, and you need to go to the hospital." Yeah. So I did. Went to the hospital, was in the ER of the base hospital, and I'm sweating. I can't get my thoughts together, and my mind is leaving my brain and looking at me from the top of the room. And I lied to all of the doctors. "Have you ingested anything? Taken any illegal substance?" "Oh, no, it's just the heat." So they treated me and wrote it up as heat stroke, but it was heat stroke combined with, bad drug experience. So from that point, I could not get my brain to come back into my head.
Wow. So even when that wore off, your mind wasn't right. It was like it opened up.
Yeah, that's the last drug I ever took in my life.
Wow.
And so I lost my brain, my wits. I couldn't bring my thoughts together. And so from there, I tried to get help. I went to counseling because they wouldn't write you up for that. So I went to psychiatric care and counseling. That didn't help. And then toward the end, I just got weirder and weirder. So anyway, I got out of the service, came back to the States, and had this condition where my mind would disassociate. And I began thinking, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live. I want to take my life.
So how did you manage that? What did you do?
Yeah, you're at your parents' house, right?
Yeah, I was living in my parents' house. People would come by and they say, hey, can we see Jason? We heard he's back from overseas. And my mother would come up and say, hey, so-and-so's here. And I said, just tell him I don't want to see him. And so I'd send everybody away. And I was just more and more isolated in my room. And then I decided that I really did want to end it. I had a job working as a laborer for frame carpenters for some guy in my parents' church had worked out. And so we were building some apartment complex that was in East Tulsa. And I was going there every day, and my mind would still disassociate, and I was terrible at all that. And then one day I got a phone call, and it was from someone in my parents' church in Tulsa. They said, hey, we understand. We know who your parents are. We understand you're in the service. You're back now. We have a bunch of kids that are going down to a camp called Falls Creek in southern Oklahoma. We are short sponsors. Is there any way you would consider being a sponsor? And then I thought,
wow,
I was going to kill myself, but, F it. And then I went and pretended to be a sponsor. I just said, well, maybe they do this, maybe they do that. And went through that whole camp, that whole week. My mind's still crazy, and I was going to kill myself when I got back. And decided it would be by gun, which is a highly successful form. So at the end of this camp, they had this service, and it was just packed with all these thousands of teenagers and hormones and all this sort of thing. And the guy down front was giving a talk. I couldn't tell you what he talked about. They had some music. I couldn't tell you what the music was. But then he invited people just to come forward, which is a euphemism for getting yourself right, or getting saved or whatever.
What we would call the altar call.
Yes, the altar call.
Yes.
Yeah.
So decision to...
I'm sitting on the back of this huge tabernacle with some girl I'd met, and I'm just thinking I'm going to get with her when this is over. And I could, and we're just there. And then the guy down front calls for the altar call, and hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or more of these kids went streaming forward, and they were met with some people counseling or something. Then the guy down front said, well, we've had a lot of people come today. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, they're just tired and their hormones are worn down and they're physically exhausted in this heat in southern Oklahoma and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just thinking that about them. And I'm thinking, nobody believes this stuff. They're just doing that. And then the guy said, we've had a lot of people come, so let's sing a song which will help kind of smooth this transition. And so they started singing a song, a cappella, I have decided to follow Jesus. And when they started singing that, I heard the voice of God. And God said to my consciousness, how about you? Have you decided to follow me? And so I got up like a tractor beam was on me. That girl was left behind. I went down the center aisle after everything. And then somebody said, what do you've come too late and all this and that. But anyway, on that walk down the aisle, I heard the voice of God say to me, today I'm healing your mind. Today I am saving you. And today I am calling you to work for me. And you will always be involved in music. And you will always remember the pain and torment that I have healed you from, and you'll use it to relate to people. So that's my story.
Yeah.
And that was 54 years ago.
Wow.
That is amazing. And you came back and started figuring out what that would look like. And...
Yeah, and 2 weeks later, I was working for a church.
Wow. So how did you do that? What was that connection?
Oh, someone made a call and they said, hey, they knew I was in Army band or something. And they said, hey, we need a part-time music director and youth director at our church. Would you be willing to do that?
And you said, and leave this construction job behind?
Yeah, that's right. So, I did that. And that was Olivet Baptist Church in Sand Springs or West Tulsa, however you look at it. And I did, and I just tried to figure out stuff.
Yeah.
Because I sort of remembered maybe the way people did it. And then I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I want it to have meaning.
Right.
I want it to connect with the way I know God. So I didn't know that you had to have 3 hymns or any of that.
Yeah.
I just, if it seemed like one and that was it, and there was some good done, I would just sit down,
Yeah. Because the Baptist church had plenty of, liturgy. We think of like you've got Protestant churches and liturgical, but the truth is there was a form to the way everything was done. And so you were supposed to fit within that, but you didn't know the rules.
Right. You're supposed to have a prelude, piano or organ, playing like 20 minutes before, setting the mood, and then you would have an opener, and then the opener would be something peppy and brief. Then you'd have announcements, and then you would have hymns, first one being peppy, and then the second or third or fourth, you had to sing all the verses except the third verse.
Wow. I was so bad for the third verse.
Yeah.
I know,
That'd be really good.
So just have a service and sing third verses.
Yeah. So how did you start to feel God's presence in music? How would you describe that transition?
Right. So I was doing that for 6 months, and then there were some people visiting in Olivet Baptist Church from Wichita, Kansas. And Walker and Joyce Ray were their names. And they asked if they could come talk with me after the service. So they came up to my garage apartment in downtown Tulsa and said they were from Midway Baptist Church. And they had seen what I was doing, and they really liked it and wanted to know if I would consider coming to Wichita, Kansas, and doing that full time.
And you and Mom had been dating at the time.
Yes.
She would come and sing solo. She was kind of a famous Tulsa singer.
Yes, she was. Quite
and then
famous.
your mothers knew each other. And so they kind of plotted a little bit. Oh, you should have Joni Elmore come and sing the specials, is what they would call the solos.
Sing a special.
Or Joni Gale.
Interestingly enough, the first person I wanted to tell when my mind was healed and I knew what my life was going to be about was Joni Gale, your mother.
Really? Why is that?
Because growing up, it seemed like she meant it. It seemed like she meant business. Seemed like if anybody believed, maybe she did.
Yeah. So there's a sincerity about what she had going on.
Yeah. So I called her and asked her if she would come sing, in the church in Olivet. And so then we started dating, and we decided we wanted to be married. We put a date on it, and it was way out. So it was even going to be it's going to be a dog and pony show. It takes some doing.
We don't do small things, really.
No. Right. So we moved the wedding date up.
So that you could go to Wichita and work, right?
Yeah, so at Wichita, I auditioned there in the music department, and they gave me a scholarship. Well, Army GI Bill was paying for school, and I was getting a scholarship. And so I had more disposable income then than I do now.
Think about you in high school. I had more.
Right.
So we were there in Wichita and trying to answer when did I begin to feel the presence of God in music.
Because obviously people noticed there was something different about you and Mom than just your run-of-the-mill music ministers.
Right. So people would always say things to me like, Jason, you're going to go straight to the top. You're going to be at First Baptist Dallas soon. And I thought, okay, I don't even know what that's about. Just kept doing what I did. And then as I began to get a sense that God wanted to shape things a particular way or use certain people, and I would see his life in them and on them. And again, I wasn't doing things in a conventional way. I was the person who would ask why. Well, why do we do this? Is it effective? And then if we didn't know why and it wasn't effective, we just stopped it.
Yeah.
So we dealt with some traditions.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I remember was you and Mom always together wanting more of God's presence and really wanting something that was genuine, that was really part of your life. So I saw you guys, seeking that together.
Yes.
Right.
And you would talk about like feeling the Holy Spirit and what that was like. And that would have been, was that sort of the early, what we might call it charismatic movement?
Yeah, it was early.
Yeah.
Early charismatic movement. And so we sought more of God, and we sought other people who wanted more of God, and we'd hang out with them.
But you were aware, even in those early years, that I guess, that when you talk about stuff of the Spirit and feeling more of that and wanting more of that even then that was probably different than mainstream church. I mean, there was certainly a movement of that, but it was a movement because it was not what everybody was doing, I guess.
Right.
Yeah,
Is that right?
It was not part of the traditional Baptist church for sure.
No, I mean, the guy that I talked about that it was our new shortstop back in Tulsa, Bill Sanders, he worked up and down Brookside when the only thing going on there was Pennington's Drive-In and a pool hall and maybe a bowling alley. It was Brookside before it was cool. But kids would go down there and they would drive from one end of Peoria to the other. And, that was called the ribbon. It was coined by an editorialist as the restless ribbon.
The restless ribbon.
And Bill Sanders knew he didn't need to stay inside the church building. So he just went out and he hung out with kids at Pennington's. He'd talk to people and connect with people. And so he was one of the inspirations for my life, for sure.
Well, that's the end of part 1 of our very interesting conversation with Jason Elmore. When we return for part 2, we're going to widen out the lens a little bit and look at the landscape of the church in America, what it looked like in the 70s and what it looks like now, and the changes that have happened in between. So tune in for that. And thanks for joining us on Mixed Up Mystics.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with a friend. And check out Pioneer Dream's other podcast, Dreamers Live, a conversation about living intentionally, and Got a Minute, a podcast that pairs short humor columns with original music.